All right, ladies and gentlemen, we are now at the top of the hour. We're going to kick off again. This is the second session that we're having with our internationally renowned color and choreographer, Mr. Ed Foote. For those of you that missed his introduction last time, I'll give you a very short version of it. If you take the number 56 and add on to it, that's the number of years he's been calling. He's been an active member of Color Lab for over 45 years. He's a choreographic specialist, calls everything from brand new dancers, come on in and have a party you've never danced before, through to the C3A program. He's one of the founding fathers of challenge dancing, so all that challenge stuff. I did find out one thing on challenge dancing that I'm not sure if we attribute that to Ed or not, but if you look at challenge dancers when they're dancing, their heads are down, they're not smiling, they're concentrating really hard. I think that is the reason challenge dancers don't smile, is because Ed is one of the founding fathers and he tells such bad jokes it just takes all the smiles away from their faces. Sorry, Ed, couldn't resist. But he has been a full-time caller for almost 50 years now, featured at numerous conventions, caller schools everywhere. He's a prolific writer on the topic. He's published square dance monthly columns for American Square Dance magazine. He's had his own magazine, Footnotes, that has been going out. Ed is a consummate entertainer, and I would venture to say can probably outdo any other caller with bad jokes and puns, as well as with creative choreography. So please welcome Ed Foote back to the forum.
I don't think I've ever had an introduction like that before. It's definitely different. Well, it's nice to be here with everyone again. I want to thank Mel for arranging all this. It's really super the way Mel sets up all these seminars. I mean, I tell non-square dance people about this, and they're just amazed. So tonight we're going to look at creative choreography. We know, of course, that this is recorded on the Orange County, California website, so you can go back and look at it. I would encourage you to take notes as we go along, because I'm going to be giving you some lists of things, and in fact, I'll tell you ahead of time what we're going to do, and use 8.5 by 11 paper versus smaller paper. We're going to theme 3 different ideas in choreography.
I got it.
Oh, I thought an alien came in there.
No, that was Hannah.
Oh.
She was probably telling Lars to hit the mute button.
Oh. Okay, so we're going to be covering different choreography items. So that would be one paper or papers. We're also going to be doing presentation techniques. I think in the write-up for this, we said that presentation is half the game on creative choreography. Half of creative choreography is the material, excuse me, and the other half is how it's presented. You can have the greatest choreography in the world, but if you don't have good presentation, the choreography goes down the drain because you've only achieved a 50% score, and we know that in school, 50% is a failing grade. So with everything on creative choreography, I always back it up with the presentation technique that will sell this choreography. We're going to wind up with a list of 9 or 10 presentation techniques. I would say put that on a separate sheet of paper, because that's good to go back and just look at that by itself, not interfering with the choreography things. So we'll get underway right now. And by the way, if you have any comments or on anything as we go along, don't hesitate to jump right in. Mel and Mark are monitoring the chat room, or you can just jump in verbally if you want. Don't feel you're interrupting me. You aren't. We're just pulling this together. The first call we're going to theme tonight is the call pass through. Now, you may be thinking, well, what a downer that is, because we know how to do pass through from facing lines and 8-chain through, we can pass through. Well, granted, so we're not going to do any of that. We're going to look at creative choreography with pass through. So Mel, if you can put up the thing on terminations initially here, from a squared set, it's going to be heads touch a quarter. Okay. So the first thing we're going to theme is a pass through from a quarter box formation. This is a quarter box, a box of four in the middle, outside, couples facing in. Who's facing? It's the girls. So I could simply say girls pass through. Don't do that. You simply say,
All right.
that's all right, no problem. We could simply say girls pass through, but how do we sell this to the dancers? If we say heads touch a quarter, girls pass through, a lot of the dancers may never have done pass through from this setup. And so what they tend to do is say, gee, nobody has ever called girls pass through from this setup before. So I don't believe the caller really means it. So I'm going to play it safe and do nothing. Well, that's what we don't want to have happen. We want the girls to actually do the pass through. So I have to convince the dancers that I mean what I say. And this is the first presentation technique, is that you must convince the dancers you mean what you have said to do. They may hear you say it, but they don't believe you if they haven't done it before. And if they don't believe you, they won't move. So in order to get the girls to do the pass through the first time I call this, I would say, girls are facing, girls pass through, go. That convinces the girls that I really mean this because I said girls are facing, and then they'll do it. So I can go ahead and do that. The second presentation technique, the word go. I have found that go is an excellent word to propel the dancers into action. They may still be a little hesitant because they haven't ever done the pass through from there before, but if I say go, why then they will go. Also, a third presentation technique is I want to use what I call off the street words. Off the street words means something so simple that if we brought in someone off the street who had never square danced and put them in a square, they would understand what we wanted them to do. And probably that would be the case here with the girls. If we said girls are facing, girls pass through, they would probably do this. So right off the bat, we have three presentation techniques in our list that's going to be longer. So once we have done the girls pass through, now we want to get out. The dancers have done something unusual, and so they're a little nervous. Yeah, they've done it, but they don't know what to do here. So I want a fast, a fast get out. So I would say partner trade and face your partner, or roll it plus. But here, since we want to keep it the mainstream, we'll say partner trade. Go ahead, Mel. That partner trade and face your partner, and now we're out. And now we can do it again. The dancers have been successful. We've been successful once, so now we can do it again. So the outsides, the ends slide through, the centers touch a quarter. Okay, now the second time we call it, we don't have to say girls are facing, because the girls now know that I mean what I say, so I can simply say girls pass through. Go ahead, girls pass through. Again, we want to get out quickly because we want to reward the dancers for what they've done. And we always want to think simple. This is a key when you're doing creative choreography. Oftentimes, callers will think of things to do, and then they say, yeah, but I don't want to do this because I don't know how to get out of it. Well, the idea is to think simple, to think unbelievably simple. So simple from here, I could say centers right and left through, and the outside girl turn around, turn back, and we're all set, and we're back to a recognizable formation. So that's our, oh, and one other thing I wanted to say, another presentation technique. So this is our fourth presentation technique. You don't have to set this up, Mel. But when I said girls pass through, go, I raise the volume of my voice because that will propel the dancers into action. It's like a hand on their back, just gently moving them forward. So instead of say girls pass through, I would say girls pass through, raising the volume of my voice. This gets their attention and gets them moving. So that's the first setup for our theme of pass through. The first setup was a quarter box formation. Anybody have any comments on there?
Well, I only have one, which you really have to identify the girls to do the pass through, because if they're active, like the heads touch a quarter, and then you would call pass through, it would be just for the center forward. That's pretty tough.
Oh, I would never call pass through. Never.
Yeah, okay.
I would say girl. Yeah, technically, in the high intellectual nature to Michael, which I know you're accustomed, it's legal, but I would never call it.
I wouldn't call it, but I see the danger of being there.
Yeah, that's just no good. All right, so the second place. Let's score back up, Mel, and have the heads move forward and face the corner. Let's not do that. let's have regular facing lines. Pass through, wheel and deal. Centers pass through. Don't do it. Okay, sorry about that. Centers half sachet.
Do you want? I can undo it.
Yeah, just from right now. Centers half sachet. I was going to say pass through, wheel and deal, centers turn back, which is the way I would call it. But since I didn't say it the right way, then no problem.
The undo button works really well.
The what?
The undo button works really well.
Okay, very good. So this is our second setup from 8 chain through, and we're going to do our pass through. And again, we're going to do our pass through with the same sex. Since the girls are used to working, we've already done the girls pass through, I can very easily say girls pass through, go. I always like to use the word go, but I would say girls pass through, go. And from here, I could do other creative choreography. In the interest of time, I won't do that. Can you unpass through those girls, Mel, or is that not possible?
Anything's possible for you.
So then, obviously, if it's good enough for the girls, it's good enough for the guys. So we can have the guys pass through. So boys pass through. Good. Now we want to get out because they're in this unusual situation. When dancers are unusual, they tend to get a little hyper. We don't want to leave them in this hyper state. We want to get them out and comfortable so they can go again. So center 4, walk and dodge, outside boy, turn back, and we'll be to a normal 8 chain through. And notice it's unbelievably simple. I'm not trying to wow anybody with a beautiful get out. The interesting thing for the dancers is the pass through from that setup, not the get out from the unusual situation. Let's now do a right and left through. And the new center's a half sachet. Sachet him again. My fault. Sachet the centers again, Mel. I messed it up. I owe you another joke because of that. Okay. I'm confusing the boxes and the squares. Sachet them again. This is nice to have the center sachet 3 times. That's creative in itself. All right. So from 8 chain through, We had the same sexes facing. We had boys pass through. We had girls pass through. So that's subsection A under Roman numeral 2. This is subsection B under Roman numeral 2. Are the girls facing from here? The answer is yes. They're facing on a diagonal. So I would say girls are facing on a diagonal. Girls pass through, go. And they will all do that without quivering at all. But I have to use those words. That's the presentation technique to sell the thing. So girls on a diagonal are facing, girls pass through, go. And then of course, did that work, Mel? Did you?
Now, terminations won't take the diagonal stuff.
All right, that's okay because everybody can see that anyway.
But I can
put girls cross and you will have it.
Yeah.
Okay, great.
So what I'm doing, just for your own reference, is when I have to use something like that, I'm just putting it in brackets, or if there's a note, I'm just putting it in brackets so it doesn't show up in the choreography.
Okay, so again, if it's good enough for the girls, it's good enough for the guys. So we get out of this, we go to a left Allemande, we come back, we set it up again. Now the guys can pass through on a diagonal. Boys are facing on a diagonal. I will say from right here, I intentionally chose the girls first for the diagonal instead of the boys, because that gives us a right-hand column, and dancers are more comfortable with right-hand columns than left-hand columns. If I had said the boys on a diagonal pass through, that would have given us a left-hand column, and I wanted to save that. Once people are comfortable with the diagonal pass through, then the left-hand column is no factor. All right, so everybody do a U-turn back. Star through, and we're back to facing lines. So that's Roman numeral 2 of our theme, pass through. Roman numeral 3, we're going to do it from a quarter tag. So pass through, wheel and deal, and centers. But when you do the wheel and deal, stop, Mel, after you do the wheel and deal.
Yep.
I'll mention something here, because I just like to throw in choreography stuff as we go along. A lot of callers will say from here, all right, I want a quarter tag, so the way I will get it is I will say center step to an ocean wave. And that'll work, but it's not considered the best. Why? Because it's what I call kerplunk calling. Pass through, wheel and deal, stop, center step to a wave, stop. It's just a stop, start dancing. So a key to keep your choreography smooth. If from a starting double pass through, you want the center dancers in an ocean wave, dance them into that wave. So to dance them into the wave, I would say centers star through and centers pass the ocean. That gives us an ocean wave, and we've danced them there rather than just kerplunk them there. Okay, and the centers swing through. So from our quarter tag, who's facing? It's the boys facing directly. So let's not do all the choreography here, Mel, because I think everybody can see this easily enough. First, I would call boys are facing, boys pass through. Then can you see that I would have a two-faced line in the middle? I could do a wheel and deal in the middle, and the outside boy turn around. We have a nice starting double pass through again. Fine. Once we do that for the boys, now the waves swing through, go from L for the waves swing through. The outside's half sachet. So this is item B under Roman numeral 3, the quarter tag. We just did the boys pass through. Now we can do the girls pass through. So the girls are facing, and Mel, you don't have to do this. Girls pass, well, go ahead, Mel. Go ahead. Girls pass through. Good. Now we want to get out of this. So the center four wheel and deal, the outside girl run, and we're back to a starting double pass through. Now, the item number 3 under our Roman numeral 3 or letter C, from our quarter tag, let's have the centers slide through and pass the ocean again. Okay, and from here, let's see, outside's a half sachet. So here's our third setup from the quarter tag, and this is the ultimate. We have built the dancers up for success. This is the coup de grace right here. We're gonna say, and every word I say here is vital, everybody is facing, correct? All, and I just said that for you all. This is how I would say it to the dancers. All same sexes are facing. Girls directly, boys on a diagonal, all same sexes pass through, go. And they would do that because I have set them up for success by the prior examples that I used, the straight ahead pass throughs, the diagonal pass throughs. If I just did this on my own, cold, nobody would do it. Even with good directional calling, everybody would break down because nobody would believe it. So that's another presentation technique. We have to set the dancers up for success. And we set them up for success by moving from the quarter box, 8-chain through, we did straight ahead and diagonal, and then the quarter tag, and we came to our final setup. To get out here, let's have the center girls run and the center four wheel and deal, and the other's California twirl. We definitely want to get out easy because this is a real, that's enough trauma for everybody. We're back to a starting double pass through after the outside California twirl. And that's our theme on the call of pass through. Let me continue on with some presentation techniques. We mentioned some presentation techniques in getting everybody through this. Some more presentation techniques. I think we said we don't want to leave the dancers unusual for unusual. Once they're there, get them out. Some callers ask, well, how long can I leave the dancers unusual before I'm in trouble, before they just will freeze and not do anything? My rule of thumb is 30 seconds. Never leave the dancers unusual for longer than 30 seconds, then get them back normal. You leave them you leave them unusual for longer than 30 seconds, they're going to become nervous and more likely to break down. Now, another presentation situation is, if you have a good idea, you ride it for all that it's worth. So that's what we've done here. Now, at an actual dance, we wouldn't do all this in one tip. We might not even do it all in one night. Maybe night 1, we would do the quarter box, and night 2, we would do the 8-chain through, straight ahead and diagonals. And night 3, we would do the quarter tag. This gives you theme material that you can use for multiple dances. So don't throw everything into one gigantic tip. Just ride everything for all it's worth. Another question callers often ask is, well, how much of a dance should be creative choreography and how much of a dance should be plain vanilla? My answer is only 20% of a dance should be creative choreography. And depending on the group, that percentage could be even lower. The other 80% should be plain vanilla to let the dancers breathe. Remember, creative choreography is the icing on the cake, but it is not the cake. And I have known over the years a few callers who have tried to make their dance the icing for the whole night, creative choreography the whole night. And it's too much. And even though these callers had great minds and were just, I was very impressed with their thinking and how well they could think. They never attracted a lot of dancers because it was just too much constant pressure on the dancers.
I would mention something else, Ed.
Yep.
When you do something clever, if you do one thing that's clever, they're going to go home and remember it. If you do 10 clever things, they're not going to.
Right. One or two clever things a night is fine. More than that, and they're going to feel oppressed. They're going to feel pressured. So, any comments here? I think that covers the presentation techniques. One presentation thing I didn't mention, and that's to use sex terminology whenever we can. And of course, here we did. We said girls and boys. And that applied here for other creative choreography. You might be able to say centers or ends, but I would recommend not doing that if you can say boys or girls instead. That always seems to work better. If they centers or ends, then dancers have to stand there and say, well, am I a center or an end? Some callers say, well, they should know that, so therefore I should be able to say that. Fine. But the idea is to get everybody through. And if you say centers and ends, maybe a couple dancers are hesitant and they hold up, and that affects the whole square. Another thing I would say is good dancers don't mind extra cues to get the weaker dancers through, because they know that if the weaker dancers break down, they're going to take them, the good dancers, right along with them. So it's okay to be over descriptive on your creative choreography, because the good dancers won't mind it at all, and the weaker dancers, that'll be the help that they need. Okay, comments on what we've done so far, the pass-through and the presentation techniques.
There was a couple of comments that came in about how many of these would you do a night, and I think you've already answered that. Whoops,
yeah.
Sorry, I just lost my terminations there.
Two and
And the other one was a comment that came in, and it's a very valid one. You touched on it. It says that same-sex pass-through from a quarter tag, doing it with the boys doing a pass, the girls doing a pass, might be a very creative way of introducing if you want the dancers later to be able to pass through from ocean waves or pass through creatively from quarter tags, just the weaning process. And I think you touched on that, saying you build up with girls pass through, boys pass through, the facing dancers pass through from the quarter tag, boys are facing pass through, girls are facing pass through, and you build up to lead to that, as you call it, the coup de grace or the coup de grace for success.
You said pass through motion waves. Do you mean the little baby pass through from parallel waves that gives you an HA or a trade by position?
The comment was the same-sex pass-through from a quarter tag might be creative, but what if you want the dancers later to pass through from an ocean wave or pass through, and you did say that you said that you would lead up by explicitly saying who you want, such as if I'm in a quarter tag, centers in the wave, pass through, facing dancers pass through, all those you have to be very specific to the dancers of what you want to do so that they don't confuse what you're doing later on.
From parallel waves, how would you do centers of the wave pass through?
No, from a quarter tag.
From a quarter tag. I wouldn't combine the two at all. To me, from parallel waves, teaching pass through, that's just the call pass through. And to me, it doesn't relate to what we did here on the pass through at all. They just have to know that they don't go as far as they might on a facing line.
Yeah, and I would assume at that point they would already have the standard pass through or the step throughs from an ocean wave. They should have done that a couple of times, or extends.
Right, and that's a good point right here. We can say from parallel waves, if you want the dancers to pass through, step through is better to say than pass through. because on pass through, the people facing in will tend to go too far and may even make a wave in the middle. If you say step, step implies a baby step, and they're likely to not make the ocean wave in the middle. All right, let's any other comments? Bob Elling had his hand raised before. Bob, did you have another comment? Okay.
Could I just
Yeah.
say it's a nice opportunity, great presentation on it, Ed. I've used that idea to an Alaman left and come back home. And so it's a very easy one for everybody to set up, because often when you Ferris wheel to the centre and you could star through and you would be home, if you veer left, tag the line face left, the boys can pass through for an Alaman left, come back and find your partner and square your sets.
Oh, that's good.
So it gives you a very nice ending to your theme.
That's very good. Very good. Thank you.
I'm sorry, I had my mute on. On your initial thing with the touch a quarter, and you're worried about the girls not doing a pass through because they're both not doing a pass through. I don't use all that stuff you use. I just say heads touch a quarter, just the girls pass through. And that answers every little problem that you had, with a lot less information for the dancers to process.
And that would be good. I probably overdo it because I'm paranoid on somebody not believing me, but your way is fine. Yep.
Yeah. And the other thing about wheel and deal and making a wave in the middle. Okay, if you're going to do an ocean wave, call the swing through all that's the ocean wave rule, and you don't need. And I can only think of one thing plus, and then we go on to advance. But I do not find any stop and go, because pass through with a wheel and deal, make a wave, and ping pong circulate. There is no pause through that action. Or should not be.
That's true, and the way you did it is perfect, and that would be fine. The problem is most callers aren't as experienced as you are, and they're going to do a pause. They're going to pause after the wheel and deal, and then they're going to say step through a wave. If they would call it the way you did, then that's fine, because people are hearing the step through a wave when they're only halfway through the wheel and deal, so then they know to go the wave. So that's fine. All right, the next thing I wanted to look at here, we know that it's improper from a starting double passing that we have right here. It's improper to say center zoom, because zoom does mean the leaders roll back and the trailers step straight ahead. Technically, from here, to call center zoom means that only the centers are active, so the centers pass through, and but we don't call that in a dance, because, or at least not until we've been paid. So here's something I like to do at a dance to emphasize to the dancers that we can call center zoom and that it's legal, and yet if they don't hear it this way, then it's going to be illegal, or as Colorado says, improper. So let's have the centers touch a quarter.
Sorry, I was just letting people in the waiting room.
Now from here, I would say centers zoom. Now, I'm calling this because the dancers now know it's only the centers are active and not the outside. Now, you can make a case for the fact, well, it's awkward for the girls in the middle because they don't have much room to roll back. And I would agree, but this is for learning purposes. This is to teach the dancers that they can hear the word center zoom, and it means only the centers are active. Let's have the center boys run. And the centers touch a quarter. Now here again, I'm going to call don't do it yet, Mel. I'm going to call center zoom, but first I'm going to have the center circulate. Why? Because if I called center zoom right now, the girl's body flow is to the right. The zoom takes them back to the left. It's a direct reversal of body flow. So center force circulate. Now the boy is walking straight ahead in the middle, so it's no problem for him. And now I say center zoom, and this is probably the better way to do it because now there's plenty of room for the person rolling back, the boy in the middle. He doesn't slam into the outside. And I like to throw this in so as an educational thing for the dancers to realize that yes, we can do center zoom, and it's only the centers that are active. Any comments on that?
Yeah, there is a lot of commentary, and there was in the past a lot of discussion on the star through zoom, touch a quarter zoom. The reality is, from the columns, although they're still quite prevalent in some of the choreography coming out of Europe, if you're doing a zoom after a touch a quarter, always put a circulate in there for flow.
Right. And I'll add to that, Mel's absolutely right. You are not allowed to call from facing lines, touch a quarter, and zoom. You are also not allowed to call from facing lines, touch a quarter, and peel off. That's a plus call. But I see this show up in printed choreography periodically, not Barry's, of course, but other places. And you just can't do that. It's a direct reversal of body flow for the leader. So if you want to call peel off from columns, call touch a quarter, circulate, now call your peel off. All right, that covers my thing here on Zoom.
I got
Yep.
another thing on Zoom, if I may.
Yep.
From lines facing out with the wheel and deal in Zoom, I think it's not so nice to dance. For those who getting to the center, I like to put a sachet in there before, like center, sachet, and then work into the zoom part, because then they're more or less drifting apart already.
Yeah, you're right, and we're kind of back to to what Bob Elling said. If you give the pass through wheel and deal and you say zoom when they're only halfway through the wheel and deal, now that from normal couples, now that girl in the middle can readily anticipate the rollback and it's smooth for her. But if you say wheel and deal pause, then it's no good and you want to have to have that shit. Do that again, Mel. Have the centers pass through the star through. Star through. All right, now here don't do it yet, Mel. We're going to do pass through wheel and deal. Everybody watch girl number 1, and I'm going to say zoom and watch where she is when I say it. All right, pass through wheel and deal.
Hang on.
Zoom. You know, early I said it, they'd only taken one step into the wheel and deal before I called it. That's another really presentation technique for smooth dancing. You can call something that on paper might be awkward. You can call it if you give giant lead time on it, so dancers have time to think of it. In fact, this just came up recently on a Colorado committee discussion. Let's have the centers pass through and star through. We were talking about definitions, and don't do this yet, Mel. We were talking, it came up calling wheel and deal from facing lines. And somebody said, well, that doesn't dance smooth, that dance is awkward. Well, right, I agree. If you say heads lead right circle to a line, pause, everybody wheel and deal, that's not going to work well. But if you let the dancers blend into the wheel and deal from facing lines, then it will sell. This is how I call it. When I call wheel and deal from facing lines, I have two different ways that I call it. Pass through. Now, can you do an as couples trade? And watch 1 and 2, boy 1, girl 2. See how they're wheeling? And now if I call wheel and deal, the body flow flowed them right in there. The as couples trade flows everybody right in, and it dances beautifully. Now I give them the command only part way through the as couples trade. The way I would say it is pass through from facing lines, pass through, as couples trade to the other end, everybody wheel and deal. And when I say wheel and deal, they're only halfway into that couples trade. So they have plenty of time to do the blend. All right, let's have, and now the second way that I call it, let's have the outsides California twirl. Star through. All right, this time I want you to watch boy 3 and girl 1.
Ah,
That looked like a good piece of creative choreography, right? I'll tell you what I'm gonna call before I even call it. I'm gonna call pass through, bend the line, wheel and deal. But I'm gonna give them the command wheel and deal way ahead of time. All right, pass through, bend the line, wheel and deal. I'm gonna say it right like that. Obviously it takes longer to move it through on the checkers, but I'm giving them the wheel and deal way ahead of time. Let's have the first couple go left, next go right. It's vital that I give them the wheel and deal command well ahead, because if I pause at all, then 3 and 1 are looking at 4 and 4 boy 2 girl, and they're kind of looking at them and want to relate to them. So now if I delay in saying the wheel and deal, they're likely to have big problems because they're not relating to the couple beside them. But if I said bend the line and then wheel and deal, they're relating to the couple in their line. And in fact, the first time I say it, I might say, bend the line, look at your line, wheel and deal. And that would be the presentation technique. The first time I call it, second time I wouldn't necessarily say, look at your line.
just as a note, Ed, there's been a couple comments come in the chat, private chat, and everything else that are along the same line. They say, what about a bend the line, wheel and deal? That you do have, pass through, bend the line, wheel and deal, but
Right.
what they were saying was setting it up with something like a tag the line, face out, then bend the line, wheel and deal will blend in a lot easier because you've got that natural break in establishing the line and they know who they're working with.
That's true. One thing I always tell the dancers, I say, anytime you're doing a line call, whether it's facing lines or lines facing out, or an ocean wave call, or a 2-face line, turn your head sideways to see your formation before you act. Don't just act immediately if you're unsure. Take 1/2 second and turn your head back and forth sideways so you see where you are, and then you'll have no trouble doing the call.
I had a quick comment on 2 of the ones that you did there.
Yeah.
On the pass through, bend the line, wheel and deal. The one of the dangers there to watch out for is that pass through and a wheel and deal is a major cliche that a lot of dancers hear from a lot of callers all the time. Pass through, wheel and deal. They're probably resolving or something. And so if you throw the bend the line in there, there's a slight chance that some people are going to tune that out if they're a little bit distracted. So you want to emphasize that bend the line a little bit. So you might say pass through, bend the line, and a wheel and deal, or something like that.
It's right back to our presentation technique of raise your voice when you're going to call something unusual.
Yeah, and then the other one on the couples trade from lines facing out and the wheel and deal. These are all cool, by the way. But the trick on that one is to make sure that that it's appropriate for your floor. Some dancers don't do the as couples trade very often, and so if they're very worried about getting through the couples trade, if they're the the least bit shaky on that, and then halfway through you give them the wheel and deal, you might flummox them. So that's just a case of judgment about what you might do is some more pass through couples trade and then a right and left through or whatever, or square.
Well, yeah, I would call as, I would assume dancers might not have heard as couples trade for a long time, if ever. So I would do as couples trades and then nothing else is the right and left through, like you said, before I ever add another call to that. I want them to be able to do the as couples trade first.
Chris, Ed, I'm just going to interject here for a moment. There's a few comments that come in saying you can't call as couples trade because it's advanced. I just want to nip this in the bud before it becomes into a theological seminary. Couples trade is basic. As couples is a concept, but if you say as couples or as a couple or any of those words to give the dancers the clue to do this successfully, it's perfectly acceptable. As a couple or as couples do something is street talk. Using as couples as a concept for other types of movements, such as right and left through, is where it gets too advanced. There's nothing wrong with saying as couples.
I've always approached it as directional calling.
Yep. I just wanted to nip that in the bud before it became something.
In fact, 30 years ago, at dances, at mainstream dances, I would be calling as couples flutter wheel. And I wouldn't say as couples, I would say as a couple, working as a pair, flutter wheel. And I never felt I was off the list. Nobody ever complained to me I was off the list because it's a directional term to get people to do things. I'm not calling a specific call that's off the list.
Okay. I want to add one more little nice way to use it. It would be from the line facing centers pass through, centers cross run, wheel and deal.
Well, that's nice. Very good. That's why you get the big bucks there, Bob. I've never called that, but I like that. Centers pass through, centers cross run, and everybody wheel and deal. Yeah, that's nice. Of course, now recognize it's half sashayed, so to set that up the first time, maybe you want to have half sashayed lines facing in, and then call it, and that gives you a normal couple, normal boy girl.
You can do a track 2 afterwards.
If you call to a lot of the clubs I call for, you might want to do the half sashayed wheel and deal just from lines facing out once or twice, just to make sure they can really do that.
Yeah, well, that's the point that Ed was making. We should have had everybody sashayed at first, centers pass through, centers cross run, wheel and deal, and in a normal.
Okay, I had some other things I want to do, but what I'm going to do, I'm going to do the next major thing. That'll bring us to about our 1 hour mark, which I guess Mel likes to go for. And then after that, I'll throw in additional things that, just additional items, but I want to make sure we get the key points here in our first hour. Let's have, Mel, let's do a head, star through, and spread. Pass through, wheel and deal. Girls pass through. Okay, from here we have a same-sex 8-chain through formation. So, what do you mean? How does? Yeah, okay. A lot of callers, if they're resolving, they would say, and don't do this, Mel. We can see that if I call a star through, that's going to give us a two-faced line, correct? Everybody see that? Going to give us a two-faced line, boys in the middle. And then a lot of callers would say, bend the line. But look at boy number 1. If I call, we don't have to do this on the checkers. You can just see this in your mind here. If I call star through, boy number 1 is moving to his right for the star through. And if I now call bend the line, it's a direct reversal of body flow for boy 1 and is a disaster for him. It's also a disaster for boy 3 because we know we have a mirror image set up here.
It's a disaster for the sides too.
It's a disaster for the sides too, right? Disaster for all the sides. And yet we hear this a lot because callers are thinking, well, I want to get to a normal couple and this is how I do it. And I'll just sacrifice the dancers because I want to get to normal couples. Well, the basic rule of thumb is we never sacrifice the dancers for what we as callers want. So if we call a star through from here because we want normal couples, and let's go ahead and call the star through. Okay. Now, what would be the next call that we could call? I want you to look at boy number 4 now. We have 2 face lines. So I could call Ferris wheel, and that's fine for the heads. But for boy number 4 and boy number 2, it's a reversal of body flow because the star through had him going to his right and the Ferris wheel has him coming to the left. So it's awkward for those 2 boys. Rule of thumb, if it's awkward for anybody in the square, we don't call it. Well, what else could we consider? Maybe we have 2 face lines. We could call wheel and deal, but it's the exact same thing for boy 4 and boy 2. The wheel and deal is bringing them around to the left after they just had a thing going to their right. So we can't call that either. And we already said you can't call bend the line. So now you're saying to yourself, well, gee, from a same-sex 8-chain through, if I call star through, I can't call anything. Everything's prohibited.
Boys trade would have similar problems.
Well,
no. Number 4 is still reversing his direction. Yeah.
Well, this is the presentation technique. The answer is from a same-sex 8-chain through, anytime you call star through, the next call must be centers trade. Now, as Alan pointed out, well, that's no good because the star through for boy 4 has him going to the right. The centers trade is having him come to the left. This is a whole theory that was put forth by Jack Lazary decades ago. And it has to do with kinesiology.
Uh-huh.
When we said star through, the boy's hand was up in the air. That raised his center of gravity. But if we have the boys trade, their hand is down most places. And so therefore that lowers their center of gravity. And if we give the command early enough, it's going to be smooth. And we give the command is in a fashion what I call as a clump call. A clump call is 2 consecutive calls that you say so fast it sounds like one call. So I would say star through boys trade. Boys haven't even started the star through before they hear the boys trade. So they're blending into the trade with their left hand as they're coming toward each other on an angle, and it dances smooth. As Alan just said, if I saw a star through pause boys trade, then it's no good. Okay, Bob?
Okay, star through centers trade, okay? A star through for the boys, half by the right, even the girls going left. So half by the right, half by the left, that's a swing through. So that's a familiar body flow, turning by the right, then turning by the left. Sometimes we nitpick too much.
Yeah. If I could add on to that, that was researched, as Ed was saying, in the kinesthetics of it. Your trade or your couple circulate after the star through would equally work, mainly because it's a forward flowing action as opposed to a direct reversal of body flow action. The trade on the swing through is actually a forward turning looping action as opposed to a few other things. It's also one of the reasons why star through and zoom doesn't work, because the zoom is a forward half circle. That's a matter of the compression of the square. There's no room. but the star through followed by the bend the line or a direction reversal does not work. It's like saying star through and the boys in the center do a half sachet nose to nose.
I would not call star through couples circulate because the boys don't have hands in doing that circulate. It's going to feel the same for them as the wheel and deal or Ferris wheel.
Well, that was the other thing I was gonna chime in and also talk about the boys' trade, which is that after that star through, some people are not going to be totally sure exactly how to line up in a nice, neat two-phase line. The boys' trade lets them know ahead of time that they're aiming for each other, and that'll help them connect. Otherwise, you'll have a few dancers who will go a little bit further. They'll do the star through and as a couple turn a little bit kind of a couple of degrees outwards. So that puts the kibosh on that. Some very wise caller a long time ago said to me, "You can never have too many centers trades."
I wonder who said that. All right, let's do a Ferris wheel and spread. Pass through wheel and deal.
Sorry, Ed, I'm getting flooded with comments here about the thing. The wheel and deal, the Ferris wheel, all those things are forward actions. Yes, they are, as was said. The reason that we're saying the kinesthetics of that flow is the same. The reason why it's followed with a trade is what Ed was saying. The hands come down when you identify boys. That establishes, and I can't remember who said it, that establishes the contact, the physical contact, and that relationship of the line with the boys to successfully complete the movement. Not everybody is taught to join hands with the person beside them at the end of each call. I just wanted to nip that off because I'm just getting flooded with the chat.
That's my problem because I teach them to touch that hand.
Yeah, a lot do, but a lot don't anymore.
Also, I use Don Beck's initial definition on Ferris wheel, which is 2 steps forward, then wheel and deal. And that's how I teach it in my classes, so none of my students would find that awkward at all.
There are, if dancers are not trained to take hands, then that limits you all the way through your dance. I have dances that where I've been a guest caller, and they're shaky, and so if I have a same-sex 8-chain through and I call the star through, I intentionally don't say men trade, because I know they wouldn't do it because they aren't trained to take hands. So I cringe when I don't call it, but I have to not call it in order to keep the floor going. Let's do a pass through wheel and deal. Double pass through. Girls trade. So here we have the other type of same-sex 8-chain through with the girls on the outside. We're going to do the star through. It's the exact same situation as before. We can watch girl number 4, the star through. If we call wheel and deal or circulate or Ferris wheel, it's a direct reversal of body flow for her. But if I call star through girls trade, then it's going to be smooth. Notice I said girls trade. I didn't say centers trade, because I don't want people saying, well, am I a center or what was I before? No, girls, they know they're girls. Coming back to this thing on kinesiology, when we said the star through has your hand up high and the center's trade has the hand down low, that lowers the center of gravity. And there's a rule of thumb, the lower the center of gravity, the more stable something is. That's why runners run bent over. Football players run bent over. They don't run standing straight up. We don't put the center of gravity building in the 10th floor. We put it down in the basement.
Tightrope walkers hold the pole down.
I thought you were going to say that's why most callers have these well-developed collars muscles in their midsection.
That's right.
Oh, okay. So
add that to your list, Ed.
Continue on with this. So we've established a rule, and we're going to expand on this rule. Anytime you have a same-sex 8-chain through and you call star through, the next call must be centers trade. All right, everybody bend the line. past the ocean. Some callers from here will, when they're resolving, they're going to say, I want to get to normal boy-girl couples. How do I do that? I can have the boys run, and that's going to give me a normal two-face line. But it's the exact same thing as we just had. Boy number 3 is moving to his right. Whatever the next call is going to be awkward for him and also for boy number 1. But if we have a center's trade, then that solves it. That lowers the center of gravity and makes it smooth. Unfortunately, I've seen even experienced callers call this because they're so intent on getting normal couples together that they don't call the center's trade, because they say, well, I called boys run, I didn't call ends run. Well, yeah, you called ends run because the boys were the ends. So here's our second sentence in our overall rule here from parallel waves. Anytime you call ends run, the next call must be center's trade. All right, Mel, bend the line.
I need to put the center straight in there, sorry.
We don't need the center straight, that's all right, just bend the line. All right, now here's something else to consider. Past the ocean. The whole world calls, don't do this yet, Mel. The whole world will call swing through boys run. Everybody calls that. But unless the timing is perfect, it's a change of direction for the boys. Not blatant, but somewhat. Let's do a swing through and watch boy number 1. And and on the swing through, we're finishing, the boys are trading by the left. So if there's any kind of pause, the swing through command will now have the boy going to the right, and that's a reversal for the boy. But if I say swing through boys trade, now that's smooth for the boys. I say the boys trade well ahead of time, and now the boys can do the trade. So that's another aspect of the value of center's trade, and that's the overall theme here, the value of center's trade. Now, I'm not saying that you're not allowed to call swing through boys right, because the whole world does that. What I am suggesting is that every time you call past the ocean, 30% of the time, consider adding a center's trade. It just smooths it out. Boys run around a girl. And bend the line. And if I call past the ocean, I'll just say a center's trade. Because as Chris pointed out, and that's what I said decades ago, from ocean waves and two-face lines, when in doubt, call a center's trade. It's going to smooth out your dancing. Bob?
Well, if you want to call past the ocean center's trade, why don't you just call fan the top?
Because
That's what it is.
Because it's a mainstream dance. Do a recycle. Veer left. Bend the line. One thing I didn't point out, I was pointing out the boys before on this past the ocean. If I call past the ocean swing through, look at the girls. The girls are finishing their past the ocean by hinging with the left hand. That's the way the whole world does it. Not that we know they shouldn't, but they do. So the girls are going to the left. If now I say swing through, it's a snap back to the right for the girls. But if I say past the ocean, girls trade swing through, now it's smooth for the girls.
One of the key differences there, though, is when you do a past the ocean, you're establishing that hand contact and the formation for the next. That's why past the ocean swing through often works, but a boys run centers followed by an action where you've got to do that direction change where they don't make that hand contact on the same plane doesn't always work as smoothly. It has that stop in there.
So consider
The ocean swing through, you can't get any smoother than that, Ed. I'm sorry to disagree. But
well, I would
Mel
call it
pointed it
the
out.
girls' trade swing through.
I would call
The kinesthetics of the body action is correct. The only difference with Pass the Ocean and Pass the Ocean centers trade, which is a common setup for, say, a lead to the right, extend, etc. But Pass the Ocean has the hand contact down on that plane for the ocean wave, which is why it works and is more acceptable. But kinesthetically, that direction change, a centers trade would add on to that.
The overall rule of thumb is, when in doubt, call centers trade. But we only mean that when we have waves and two-face lines. We don't mean from lines all facing the same way or 3-in-1 lines. We only mean that rule when we have waves or parallel waves or parallel two-face lines.
Ed?
Yep.
For variety reasons, does it always have to be trade? Because you also could use the centers cross run as long as they move over the middle axis.
That's true. And I don't think a cross run that much because a lot of people in the States can't do that. In Germany, everybody can do it. But everybody in Europe, we know everybody in Europe and Asia dances better in the States. So I have to adjust what I say for the States.
Right.
Okay.
you know, from this.
I need to make an interruption here, so just hold that thought for a second, Michael. Ladies and gentlemen, we've looked at the two major aspects right now, which are the use of the centers pass-through and use of the centers trade for the creation of your choreography, the main points, the timing, and the delivery of how you do it and where you use it. I'm just putting an interruption in here because we're just at the top of the hour. For those of you that do have other plans and other dances scheduled, by all means, don't feel you're obligated to stay. The sessions are recorded on the OC Callers website, which is on the links, and you can get there, or if you not have that link, type occallers.com and it will come up and you can rewatch the videos. All the presentations and notes will be there. We're going to continue with Ed. We're going to go into the next series of concepts, but please, if you do have other obligations to go, I know some of you have a dance that you need to go to, by all means, don't feel obligated. Come back and ask. And of course, Ed Foote can always be reached via email, or if you're not sure, just send me an email and I can forward you his email address and contact details if you need to get a hold of him. Sorry, go ahead, Ed.
Okay. Well, any comments now or things?
Yeah, I
and so
was going to add another one that I use a lot at my own clubs with, is I will have the boys walk and dodge. And I love to do the combination from this setup is boys walk and dodge, boys run, chain down the line, which gives them a 3-in-1 line doing a chain down the line, but it's so easy.
Yeah, that's good. In the States, I would be worried about the center boy that has to run to the left. I would not be confident that he could do that.
Okay. Thankfully, my dancers don't have your lack of confidence.
Right.
And I live in the States.
Dancers are better trained than mine.
I would add on to that what Ed said right at the beginning. If you are doing something like that, a simple boys in the center walk and dodge, boys run around the outside girl fixes that problem. Just the simple prompts for dancer success, to give them that the first time you use it, is an easy way to alleviate that. I think both you, Bob, and Ed said that.
Mm-hmm.
Just to sort of harp on that thing that Ed was saying about the presentation on that Pass the Ocean centers trade. That's what we're saying in our head and how we're describing it, centers trade. But what you actually want to say to the dancers, assuming that they're started as normal or sashayed couples, is Pass the Ocean girls trade, because they don't have to process it. Am I a center ahead of time of the Pass the Ocean? They're immediately on the lookout. If you say Pass the Ocean and the girls trade, the girls are immediately on the lookout for the other girl. And every little thing that you can do like that to make things 100% bulletproof helps build the dancer's confidence. And that confidence is what you need when you're starting with your girls diagonal pass through and all that fun stuff. to get them to trust you. So, and every little bit reinforces that all through the dance.
Yep, that's good. Yeah, and you're right. When I call Pass the Ocean Girls Trade. I don't say Center Straight. And coming back to something that Bob said, I'm not saying don't call Pass the Ocean Swing Through. Go ahead and call that. I'm saying 30% of the time consider calling Pass the Ocean Girls Trade Swing Through. You don't have to do it all the time. You don't have to do even less than 1/4 of the time, but just do it occasionally.
That's variety. That's variety, Ed. And I'm all for variety. Oh, can I back up to the beginning when you were doing your pass-throughs for just a second? I like the diagonal pass-through. Have you ever considered Head Start through girls diagonal double pass-through? And that's a fun thing to do.
Yep. And of course, he chose the girls instead of the boys because that gives us a right-hand column when we're done, and the dancers are more comfortable with right-hand columns than left-hand columns.
But that's just a little thing to add on to your pass-through.
The other thing, Ed, your comment about from same-sex star-through, often they do a centres trade, or they might not, and try to do a bend the line. That's what they're heading for as a newer caller. They should consider cast off as well as bend the line and choose which is going to be the best for them. So sometimes when you have the centres straight and cast off, it works really well. Yeah.
Yeah, I guess. Are you saying do the cast off after the center straight or before the center straight?
After the centres trade, yes. Because it leads them into it really well. And so it's probably better than dancing a bend the line after the centres trade.
Yeah.
Well, I think the bend the line is no problem after the center straight. I would be more leery of the cast off than I would the bend the line, because the bend the line, the center straight is feeding everybody right into that bend the line.
What I find very interesting about the discussion is the differences that come out from where people dance in the States. How they dance differently is different than how North America generally dances from Australia, how Australia dances differently than Europe. What is being taught and what is being taught as a standard or a normal level of dancing is going to vary for everybody. I know a lot of places that will use centers and ends prolifically intermatched, and it's not a problem. Some people are willing to take hands. Cast off 3/4 into those lines is a very common thing that's done here in Australia. I know that, but that's where when we had a session earlier on caller judgment, you have to be able to judge what your dancers are for, and if it's something different, as Ed was saying at the beginning, use whatever you can to prompt them for success.
Mel?
Yes, Michael.
Hannah has had her hand up for quite a while.
Yeah, sorry, Hannah.
Hi, Hannah.
I will say this because I've got I can't see everybody's pictures or hands. So if you got your hand up and waving, I can't see everybody because some people are hidden behind chat windows and whatnot. I'm trying to monitor. So if you do have something to add relevant, pipe up, speak up, interrupt. Go ahead, Hannah.
Well, I almost forgot what I wanted to say. I've been waiting so long. But when you call Pass the Ocean, how about left swing through?
Yeah, if in Sweden, there's no problem. In the U.S., I don't want to call it till after I've been paid.
It sounds like Swedish callers cannot call in the States.
Well, there's a true story on that. A long time ago, who's the caller that founded Sting? What's his name?
Paul Bristol.
Paul Bristol, sorry.
Yeah.
No, before him.
No, it was Ingvar Pedersen and Stefan Sietholm.
You're right.
And Robert Björk didn't join because then it would have been roasting.
Stefan Sietholm, he and a couple other callers came over to the national. Let me change it this way. European callers that come over here for our national square dance convention, they invariably call way too hard for the floor because they're used to calling for European dancers and not American dancers. And even though they're told you have to keep it very simple, they have a difficult time mentally dropping themselves back to the level that's over here. And it's interesting for me, when I was going to Europe, I made what, 20 trips to Europe or something. It would take me 2 days after I got back to the States to be able to bring myself to lower myself back to the level in the States.
Yeah. One of
I
the
have
most
another
common.
question. Yeah,
Go ahead.
sorry. I
Go
have
ahead.
another question. Isn't body flow also depending on how fast you are calling?
Well,
No.
timing. It's timing with the, as we said,
Because
it's not so much the
very,
speed of calling, but the timing.
Yeah.
Putting clump calls together. The second
If-
call right away.
if you call from a wave, girls in the middle and boys on the end, girls trade and recycle, I find it very uncomfortable to dance if it's called very quickly. It's like throwing me once to the one side and then to the other side, and I simply hate it.
Well, it depends on how fast the recycle is called.
Yeah, exactly.
If it's called slow, you're right. If it's called fast, so the girls are only halfway through their recycle before they hear the halfway through the center's trade before they hear the recycle, it should be smooth because they're anticipating it. And I would do it as a clump call. I would say girls trade and all recycle.
Yeah,
And
I
by
still,
saying
I
that,
still,
the girls have barely taken one step.
Yeah, a lot of that, especially with, I'm just going to go back to where you said, when you set up for success, the hand position and where they are, if you have, for instance, a ladies trade and recycle, because the hands are disassociated, and the boys generally know, I know in Europe, they teach a recycle is let go of hands and everybody step straight ahead first, then the ends cross fold and follow, etc. That's generally not a problem, but the hand contact is established. When it's called in a lot of places, past the ocean, recycle, etc., the end dancers are disconnected and they start doing the recycle before the hand contact is made, which is why it goes into. And what we're talking about here is the difference between the command time, how long it takes to say the calls, the delivery time, how long, the delivery time when that call's supposed to be said, and then the execution time, and that's a whole separate session.
the reason why I don't like it is exactly the hands, because
Yeah.
very often, more often than I would think, since the call has nothing to do with hand holding, very often the end person is pushing me when I'm doing the recycle, and really that's not comfortable.
Yeah.
So
Well, that brings up to another topic of why at the end, now again, this might not be applied to Europe, but it certainly is in the States, why at the end of a lot
it
of
happens here too.
why at the end of a dance, in a lot of cases in the States, are the girls tired and the boys aren't tired? It's because the girls are being dragged through. And that's a perfect example. And the girls are being dragged through on a Ferris wheel because the boys don't trust the girls to walk beside them. They're being dragged through on the recycle. They're being dragged through on the flutter wheel. So the girls are tired when a dance is over and the men aren't.
I always thought it was because women work twice as hard as men, even in square dancing.
Mhm.
Well, as Betsy Gata will attest, I mean, the girls have to work twice as hard and do backflips and all. But I would agree with Hannah on a lot of the calls for the recycle. I think the women are, doing a lot of back and forth. That's very tough on them.
Especially for recycle, if the centers are trading, I'm moving to the left and then somebody is pushing my right hand and forcing me to go that way before I do it myself, and that's really uncomfortable.
And that's because
Your
the boys have started.
your solution there is that we know that recycle technically is a no hands call. So when you're doing the center's trade, just keep your right hand down at the side and then the man can't grab it.
Yeah.
On the other hand, I think
Or better, even put it behind your back. If you put that right hand behind your back, then he can't, there's nothing, he can't grab it.
Then he will make a mistake. And break the square. No, I'm kidding.
Before
No, you're
we get,
probably right, Hannah. You're probably right.
Yeah.
Before we get to the next session, the next part that Ed was going to be talking about, one of the comments that came in was the dancing in Europe. Is it mainstream or plus and above? And do they spend more time in all position dancing in mainstream than in teaching advanced? And I don't think it's a matter of more time. It's just a different approach. For instance, whereas in a lot of places they may look at a standard position as ocean wave is boy on the left or boy on the outside, girl in the middle. Whereas in Europe, a lot of the times when they're taught an ocean wave is 4 dancers in an ocean wave formation. It doesn't matter if it's boys or girls. Ends and centers. Recycle is ends and centers. From what I've been told, a lot of places are still like that, but it is slowly turning the wheel into the nominal choreography because of the rush. Hannah mentioned it. Helen mentioned it. Her basic group spends about 2 years at basic before they even think about moving on, because that's just the way they dance it. So I hope that answered the question. I didn't want to spend a lot of time on that because that's a whole different kettle of fish.
Let me give the philosophy of dancing in the States versus Europe, and might also be Australia, but Europe, since I've called there so often. And it's interesting. The philosophy of dancing in the States is square dancing is fun. And so fun means
Easy.
It means easy. It means not having to think. It means everything, the ultimate easiest thing it can possibly be. And if I don't have to think, that's fun. The philosophy in Europe is square dancing is fun. And I don't want any caller to be able to break me down. So I'm going to learn all the definitions. And then I won't break down, and square dancing is fun. And we have these two gigantic opposites of philosophy. And I like the European philosophy. And people say, well, can't we adopt that in the States? No, it's too ingrained. It'll never change.
Simple way to put it, Ed. In the U.S., it's checkers. In Europe, it's chess.
But it's not even checkers here. It's Chinese checkers. It's Chinese.
No. That's very complicated.
But I wouldn't say it all the way. I think in Europe, and probably in Australia and Japan, they're probably using more the programs. Now, we're having the rush into the high levels too, and getting a little bit weaker on that. But I think Jerry Story mentioned 20 years ago that we got to watch out because we're just 20 years behind. When we don't start working the programs as recommended by Color Lab, we're going to have the same problems you're facing in the States. So if wherever in the world, it's not better or whatever, it's just working the programs. And if that doesn't happen, and if you don't can dance with your friends at the basic mainstream and you have to rush up to plus in a certain time, there got to be some sacrifices you got to make due to the time lag and the choreo. So and I think the dragging around with the ladies is another point, which I think that a lot of callers mostly follow the man across and do not so much have the ladies in their view with the choreo. So I think there's need to be an emphasis on that as well for the callers, right?
Recycle is a good example. They should put the ladies on the end more often.
Yeah. And then we can revenge.
Well, so they can understand also, do a swing through from a standard box, swing through, recycle. Let the boy be in the center and get used to what it's required to do the flow. And you call it equally more, they'll dance it better, 1. 2, they understand each other's role. A little memory about Stefan when he first came over to America, because it just, to this day, I remember the thing that broke down the squares more than anything else, and that was from a box 1-4. Head square through, do his centers in, and cast off 3/4. Here in the States, they never heard of doing a centers in for facing couples.
Yeah.
For the new callers, a box 1-4 is now called a corner box.
Okay.
And
Right.
the former zero box.
And the former zero box, yes.
Yeah.
And the square through box, and about half a dozen other ones.
And an 18 through position.
Yes.
Right.
No,
Ed,
it's interesting when you teach all 8 circulate for basic. This is very interesting to me because I have noticed that some ladies have troubles. If you put them on the outside, they are end position. There's no problem for them to do all 8 circulate. But as soon as they are in the middle, there is a problem. And I don't know how many times in different ways you can explain it. And there are still some ladies that have difficulties to understand it.
It's a matter of teaching from the beginning.
Yeah.
I start off with couples circulate, and then I don't teach the others. I do couples circulate, just the boys circulate, just the girls circulate, and bingo. And then do a U-turn back and do the same things. And if you teach it in that way, the dancers have no problem with it.
That's exactly what I did. And still, when we went into the ocean waves, this lady had problems. She didn't make a mistake when the boys were facing the same direction as she was.
does she dance advanced?
No, she's a basic dancer and she struggles with every basic call, but this one is especially difficult for her.
Okay,
So,
then what you do, Hannah, is get her to have the couples circulate. Now just the boys circulate, just the girls circulate.
Yeah.
Now girls turn around, circulate the other way. Make it a logical thing that, oh yeah, I can turn around and go the other way. You know,
Okay.
and just doing that and take the stress off of her.
yeah, but it's so interesting that when she's on the end position, there is no problem because
Sure.
there is no place to go to other than the outside places. But in the middle, she either wants to do a trade or something strange.
Then you
Okay,
what?
but,
Where's the
I
next
have a
girl?
question.
Girl circulate.
Yeah.
Where does she look when you call it and when she's in the middle?
She's not a typical square dancer looking around her. No, she's looking at the floor.
Okay, so I would tell her to get the head up to look forward,
Or-
because
yeah.
if she's looking to the other side, that's her way to go. And
Yeah.
if she looks out, she needs to go around the corner. And of course, the smaller the boxes and the path gets to work, the more difficult it gets.
Yeah.
And
Therefore,
you don't single her out.
but
Michael
get
has
the
a
head
good
up
idea.
to see.
I'm
And it's
gonna
the same thing-
interject here a bit, Michael.
Yeah.
We've all had dancers that have these issues, and one solution is not going to work for any and all dancers, but there are solutions. Head up, everything else are all really good suggestions. Those are things that you're going to have to find. The reason I interjected is Ed still has a little bit more to go, and before we get into open discussion, I'd like to bring us back here because he's given his time up for his presentation, and then we can come back to this discussion at the end. So sorry to cut you off there.
No,
Okay.
it's okay.
One thing for Hannah, a thing that I use is the racetrack. There's an outside racetrack and inside racetrack. If she has her head up, she's following the car in front. The next,
I've tried that too. I've tried everything, believe me.
maybe she needs to take up checkers. Huh?
Yeah.
You got it.
Okay, the next item I have, and this doesn't involve choreography. This is what I call hints to tell the dancers for better dancing. And these generally are not written down. A lot of callers know them. Obviously, Mel, Bob, and Michael will know these. But for everyone else, I'm going to give you 6 hints to tell the dancers for better dancing. Number 1, they need to align themselves with the walls. The human race is straight line oriented. And so if dancers are aligned with the walls, they can do their pass through, bend the lines and pass the ocean, and their mind works fine. But if their square gets unaligned with the walls, all of a sudden the square can break down and the dancers won't know why. They'll stand there and say, well, gee, the caller didn't call anything I don't know. And yet here I am broken down. I don't understand it. And a reason that could be is they did not align with walls. So I tell the dancers, if you see your square is not aligned with the walls, then get yourself aligned with the walls. You be the person to make a slight adjustment to get the square back aligned with walls. Now, there's a key place where this is vital, and that's when the caller says, promenade, don't slow down. Heads wheel around. Invariably, we know we have facing lines. Invariably, those facing lines are not aligned with the walls. At that point, one or two people should make a slight adjustment, backwards or forwards, just one step to get the square aligned with walls. When I'm a guest caller and I call heads wheel around, and I see people doing that, individuals doing that to get their square aligned with walls, I know these are the better dancers, and these are the dancers I'm going to watch for the rest of the night because they know what's going on. So the first thing is align with walls. The second thing is tell your dancers early on, when the caller says promenade, don't slow down, you know that 99% of the time the caller is going to call heads or sides wheel around. So therefore, whisper in your partner's ear heads or sides so that everybody knows who they are, and then when the caller says it, there'll be no problem. Can't believe the amount of times I see where I say heads or sides wheel around, everybody's talking, well, what are we, heads or sides, and who is it, and what a disaster. So I say whisper in your partner's ear, especially if you have a dumb partner, we're heads or we're sides, and then they're going to do the call. And then look for people, and you back to align with walls, teach the people, show the people that when you have heads wheel around, the square is in line with walls, and show them how to just maneuver one or two steps so that you can get the square aligned with walls. Now, obviously, you can't align with walls if you're dancing in a hall that has circular sides. Fortunately, that happens very rarely, so that is the case. Next, from facing lines of 4, if the caller doesn't say up to the middle and back, don't go up to the middle and back, because otherwise it's going to throw the timing totally off. That may not be a case in Europe, or in Europe, I know lots of times the caller will give the dancers time to go up to the middle and back, and it looks great and the styling's wonderful and all that. Here, if you say heads lead right circle to a line, some of the people are going up to the middle, some aren't. And the people that are, then they hear the next call and they're going backwards and they kind of look like an H in there, and it's just awful. So I tell the people, if the caller doesn't go up to the middle and back, then don't do that. So I've given you 3 things so far, and there's 3 more. Next one, if the dancers get lost, tell the dancers, if you get totally lost and have no idea where to go, don't turn around. Simply turn your head sideways and see where you should go. And if you see where you should go ahead and go there. But if you still don't see where to go, just stand there and someone will pick you up. Someone will gently put their hand on your shoulder and guide you into place, and expect that will happen. The reason the dancers should not turn around is that it's much easier to guide people into place from the back, rather than if somebody is standing there face to face, right in your face, it's tough to move them to where they should go. And explain that to them. And repeat that till they get the idea. If they get totally lost, they turn their heads, but don't turn their body, even if they're facing out. Just stand there and someone will pick them up. Next, and I guess this is number
5.
5. Yep, 5. Tell dancers, especially new ones, in squaring up, strong couples should be opposite, not adjacent. Weak couples should be opposite, not adjacent. Why? Because that gives everybody a strong corner. That gives every weak dancer a strong corner. In addition, a lot of the calling in square dancing is two-couple dancing. And if, say, heads lead right, circle to a line. If the heads are the strong couples, they're facing the sides, and the sides are the weaker couple, so they can get the sides through. But if the strong couples have squared up as couples 1 and 2, let's say, then you have two strong couples working together, they have no problem. But if you have two weak couples working together, and they're likely to break down, and if they break down, they're going to take the whole square with them. I also tell new dancers that when you're going out to a new dance for the first time, assume you will be the weaker couple. You just graduated. Assume you are the weaker couple, and if you go with another couple to a dance, when you square up, intentionally square up across from each other, not adjacent. And the final thing is, if you break down, get back to facing lines. Now, we all know this. We've all heard this. If you break down, get back to facing lines. And that's no problem. So why do so many squares not do this? Well, they do it for a couple reasons. First of all, most dancers can't get to facing lines when they're strewn all over the floor from breaking down. So the rule is you get back to squared set, and then have the heads back out to the right, make a facing line, and then that keeps everybody in sync and in alignment. But if we have stupid heads, then it's up to the sides to back out to the right and make a line. And I tell the dancers, once you get squared back up, the heads have 5 seconds to shape up and back out to the right to make a line. And if you see the sides don't know what's going on, and the heads don't know what's going on, and you're a side, then you take the initiative and you back out to the right and make a line, because somehow we got to have lines. So those are the 6 things to tell dancers that aren't necessarily written down, but are often very important for the success of the dancers.
One of the problems that I see when we're in facing lines, they have a tendency, if they hear right and left through, to do it, to get started, and the rest of the square might be in an 8-chain through at the time, not in line. So they have to pay attention to actually let the caller tell you when to go.
Yeah, and that's a good point. And I was going to bring that up. That, to me, you have to tell the dancers, once you get to the facing lines, now you have to wait until the caller gets the floor back to facing lines, and the caller will do this. Most callers will do this. So you have to look around and see when the floor is back to facing lines. And don't take the first call that comes along. The caller is going to have to call 2, 3, 4, 5 calls to get everybody back to standard lines. And so you have to wait for that to happen. And I would say the majority of time, I see squares get back to facing lines, and I'm still calling to get everybody back to facing lines, and they're picking up the first call I say, and now they're broken down again. And at that point, I say, these people are dumb. I have no more responsibility for them. I did my job, get everybody back. If they don't know, to wait for facing lines, and that's their problem.
I got a comment on that.
Yep.
If I may.
Yep.
Usually I tell my dancers to, if the square totally breaks down, to square their sets. Especially in the newer days now, callers use so many home get outs that if you set up a line and you're probably the weakest square anyway, and the caller sees that the floor is breaking down, some squares breaking down, and he resolves it and has a home get out, they're again not where to start with the others, because from the lines they got to get their square again. So if I want to get them back into lines and do not want to have a home get out or resolve because I'm playing a theme or whatever, I would expect them to square their sets, and whenever the command comes, make lines or normal lines up to the middle and back. Then is when I ask them to get into their line, because then I have brought everybody else into normal lines. And then we're again on the same track. So this is what I would prefer.
Yeah, that's a good point. Or the other option is if they make the lines and the caller resolves the home, then those head couples just move back over to the head position again. But your way is a good way.
Bob, you're muted.
Keep going to the wrong spot. Anyway, 2 comments. On the first thing, absolutely right, but there is a reason when you're a quarter out of phase, facing the corners of the room. I believe there was a caller once told me you can't call 3 calls in a row before somebody breaks down. And that I found that to be very accurate. And the reason is when you're facing the people naturally want to face the walls. And the problem is if you're 1 quarter out, there's 2 walls you could turn to face to be facing a wall. And a significant amount of people will make different choices. And that just messes everything up. But let's get back to the I did a thing at Collar Lab on breaking down and making the lines, and I teach my dancers every boy gets the closest girl possible and then make a line facing the other ones, and I choose that you always make those lines facing the side walls. Now what I do that's significantly different than everybody else, I call that's breaking down. So what I do is I'll do a thing, head square through 4 hands, swing through, break down, lines up to the middle and back, blah, 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 and touch a quarter, circulate, break down. And I teach the dancers to make those lines on their own. And so it is. So I give them 4 beats and they have to be in a new line all the time, and it works. And so I have a group that's on Sunday nights. If they break down, boom, it's like, gee whiz, I didn't even know they broke down half the time. And it's fun.
When I learned to dance, that was what our
it.
callers did for us.
Yeah.
When I learned to dance, it was in Germany, but that's making lines on a breakdown was always one of those things. And when I started calling, one of the things they taught us was when you do make lines, the reason you have the heads back out, it's easier to see a line standing in a row down the square than it is seeing a line or a solid wall in front of you. I don't know why that is, but if you see a line standing static where you're looking down everybody's shoulder, that is for some reason easier to see than seeing the backs and the fronts of everybody.
The reason is...
And all the dancers can look at the collar as well.
Exactly, Anna. Whereas if they're all facing, they can all look at the collar. If half the square has their backs to the collar, he can't see beyond them at the couples facing them. He sees the backs first. And that's why it's always better to be facing the side walls. And you can intimidate the callers. If you got 8 dancers looking up at you, bingo, oh gosh, something's wrong. But if 4 couples or 2 couples have their backs to you, so what? Less likely to get a response from the caller.
The thing is why it's easier to see when the lines are aligned to the side walls is there's an empty space on the floor.
Yeah.
And callers are not used to empty spaces on the floor.
Good point, Guido.
Ed, you were going to do a little bit on fan the top. Were you still thinking of doing that?
Well, no, we're kind of, it's a plus ball for one, and Mel likes to keep it a mainstream, and we're kind of getting along now. So I thought I'd leave that go unless somebody wants to discuss that. I was going to discuss the 16 places you can call fan the top.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I have no problem setting these sessions up for plus or looking at advanced or doing that. I just like to announce them beforehand because we lose a lot of the new callers that way. Hannah, you've got your hand up again. I can actually see you this time.
I'm putting it in the left corner now. Can you see it? Okay, so those 6 advices you had are really great. How do you feel about teaching the dancers when they square up to notice who is the partner, notice who is the corner, and also notice who is the opposite from their position, like the mirror dancer?
Oh yeah, eventually you want to teach them that if you break down, look at who your opposite is. It's probably too much work at the beginning, but I do tell people once we get to experience plus and beyond, then they should know who their opposite is.
I did that for a class where there were many dancers that had troubles, and when I pointed out that they have a mirror dancer, they didn't understand what that meant. So we did a little session, like doing a couple of calls and then taking half of the square away so they could look at their mirror person, and then we would repair the square so they would understand what it is.
Right.
And that helped those dancers, really.
And definitely a good thing to tell people.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, for those of you that want a copy of those, I posted them in the chat. I'm also going to be sending them to Mark and Ed's 6 Hints for Better Dancing, and a couple of comments on making the squares and practicing that are going to be able on a single sheet of paper to be downloaded and reviewed, and you can expand on them at your leisure.
Wow, that's impressive. Yeah. So I would say that's my presentation for the evening. I appreciate so many of you being part of the group here and listening to what I have to say. It's always a pleasure to work with Mel and have him set up all these sessions.
Ed, you are always welcome to come back, and I have a feeling, given what we were talking about on presentation, timing, there's a few callers. We've got Dave Prescott coming back to talk about that. We've got Guido Haas is going to be with us next week. Are you still with us, Guido?
Just left.
He's there.
I think.
Oh, he's there. He's just not in his chair.
I just don't always see his dulcet face and tones there. Guido's going to be coming up and talking to us about real hexagons in the very near future. I believe that might even be next week. I just got to check my schedule here. Yeah, on the 1st of August, Guido's going to be talking about using real hexagons, an easier approach. On the 8th of August, Dave Prescott is going to be coming back. We had a lot of really positive comments on his presentation. One of the most positive comments was, it's really nice to look at mental image calling with a simple few movements. With looking at it from 10 movements to understand the concept was much easier without having to memorize long lists. Thank you for that. Dave will be back to present the second part of this series on just understanding, and that's expanding mental imaging into perhaps the use of modules, understanding the left, right, and center cancellations. So he'll be back on the 8th of August to deal with that, and we've got a number of different sessions coming up. And Ed, I think we might even get you back to seeing how you opened up the can of worms to do a refresher on command timing, delivery timing, and execution timing, and how they have to work together. If you're more than willing, it is one of the topics on the list, and seeing how you brought it up today, I don't mind hornswoggling you into another one if you're up for it.
Yeah, we can discuss that in the future, yeah.
Ladies and gentlemen, as always, I'd like to say thank you to Mark Hart, who has graciously offered to host all of the sessions and the recordings on the OC Callers website, and he also looks after the door, letting people in, letting people out while we're doing the presentations and all the technical background stuff. So thank you very much, Mark. As always, appreciated. You don't always get the recognition that you deserve. And thank you to everybody, and everybody, a big thank you to Ed Foote for coming in again, and always welcome. And we definitely hope to have you back. And the room is open for discussion. So if you want to look at the fan the top stuff now, you can, or you can just open the floor up for discussing anything.
Well, maybe we hold the fan the top for a plus night.
Yeah, we can do that as well. Yes, Jeff.
Yeah, one thing that
people do, and I've found this in my club, that if you tell them to do a Zoom, some of them are still doing a substitute. They want to cut corners. And I have stopped a few of them by calling substitute, by calling Zoom 1.5, and that really buggers them up.
Well, keep doing it. Keep doing it. They'll learn that that's how it should be.
Yeah. For those of you that don't know what a substitute is, it's when you have the centers arch and back up over the end dancers, and the outside dancers dive under.
I still call it.
Yep.
They don't go out in the big arch. They just take the short cut. And yeah, it's
Okay.
very annoying.
Jeff, have the centers face out in cloverleaf.
Just have them
Good.
separate and stand behind the outside.
But I use a good get out for 1.5. And that is a 0 line, right and left through, left touch a quarter, Zoom 1.5 to a right and a left grand. And, you know, a lot of them are too busy bumping into the person behind instead of looking for their partner.
That's was addressed earlier tonight by saying you should have a circulate before you do the Zoom.
Yeah, you're not allowed to call that combination because it's a direct reversal of body flow for the Zoom lead version.
Yeah. Ed doesn't allow that call, so.
Yeah. You'll see a Zoom, that would be a column Zoom. You'll see Zooms from columns quite often. Where they become an issue is when you zoom in a column, is a zoom defined as a split action, or is it defined not as a split action?
A group of 4 call.
Yeah. And that's where you have it, because when Zoom is often taught, you have, if you're looking at someone's back, you walk forward and take their place. If you're not looking at someone's back, you walk in a forward circle and come and stand behind that dancer. And if you haven't taught it as a 4-dancer call or a 2-couple call, then you could find yourself in a whole world of hurt.
It's not even a 4-couple call, it's a 2-dancer call.
Yes, it's a 2-dancer call. It's a tandem.
Right.
Well spotted.
Yeah, but it takes 4 people to do it, because otherwise you don't know which way the Zoomer is going.
Yeah.
That's true.
Is it easier to do it from left-handed column?
I would say it's equal.
It doesn't make any difference.
Yeah, no
It's
difference.
just that I used it there to get them to a right and a left grand.
Are the dancer more used to go to the right or to the left?
They go away from the center. It's not right or left.
Yeah.
You can call Zoom from a single file promenade. They have to go away from the center.
Sure.
And if dancers don't know where the center is, just look to your left and to your right, and where more people are, there's the center.
Yeah, all you got to define is the leader in the trailer, right?
Correct.
True.
You have to say boys are the leaders, all Zoom, or girls are the leaders, all Zoom.
Right. And what I tell my dancers, like if you have to have a partner and you have the choice of having 2, then you stay in your own half. You don't cross the axis, right? Yeah. So because then the other one wouldn't have anyone, and this is the same with the Zoom column. If we have 4 tandems, then you got to split it up the way so everybody gets a tandem, unless you define the center box with a tandem. Same if you have line spacing out and call regular normal line spacing out and call boy run. One boy would have 2 girls, the one on the right and the one on the left, and so he has to stay in his own half. Yeah.
Yeah, so you like to call from a column. Zoom, center Zoom, everybody Zoom.
No, it's just the distinction. You have the choice of having 2, then you stay in your own quadrant.
I say that with a laugh because I've called that.
Okay.
To distinguish the separation, as Ed pointed out at the beginning of the thing about having the center zoom.
Yeah.
Which
Well, I would do it with beginners, but
Oh,
I
I
would
didn't
love
know we
that,
were
yeah.
beginners. I thought we were mainstream.
You can do it from a column, center
That's
zoom.
what I said. From a
Yeah.
column.
Yeah.
From a column. Everybody zoom, center zoom. Everybody zoom, center zoom.
Absolutely.
I might point out that beginners are mainstream dancers that haven't learned all the calls. They're not necessarily not mainstream.
Sometimes that's an advantage.
Zoom from the ends of waves and two-faced lines sometimes can be problems.
Yeah. For some.
And you need to give the centers something to do while they're doing it so that it sort of helps stabilize it a bit.
Make sure when you give the centers something to do, that it's something to do with each other.
Yes.
For example, if you called Zoom centers run, if you shot it out like that, some people are going to be halfway through the Zoom while somebody's trying to run into their place, and they're going to
I was
crash.
thinking the centers trade.
Yeah, centers trade is pretty much the thing.
Yeah, Ed's favorite call when you.
We can't have too many centers trades.
Ed, do you have a list of things that you regard as call combinations that should be used as opposed to the call combinations that shouldn't be used? Like you've stated a couple tonight in terms of rules.
I have a 6-page handout that I've given out for years, 150 things you should never call.
Oh,
and then in addition to that, on the Color Lab website, there's, I can't think of his name now, who's the caller that passed away about a few years ago? It's his list.
Tim Mariner.
Tim Mariner, yeah. Tim Mariner has a list of about 40 things you shouldn't call. So, so there's plenty of, that's a good list to download because it's, there's things on there that I hadn't even thought of, and everyone on there, it's correct. You shouldn't call it.
I think there's even a call out called "My Favorite Bad Call."
Well, yeah, that's a whole paragraph. That's a whole sheet of paper of
right
everything lumped together. It's just.
Right.
Isn't there a YouTube with a tip that's called something like that of all bad things? Something fun like that. What was it?
I don't know.
That's probably
maybe
that routine.
Maybe it was an audio recording, but yeah, there was something.
Yeah,
I think it was Tim Mariner. Maybe.
I think somebody took that list.
It is not. It is one of Tim's lists, and he's got it. It's put down. It's called the Choreo Nightmare.
Yeah.
And that's part of that session that Tim gave on that. We have provided it, but all that material is available on the Color Lab website, including the whole document package of Tim's notes and everything is still all available. We seem to be talking. Sorry?
What did you say it was called? Something nightmare?
Choreo Nightmare.
Choreo Nightmare. Okay.
Yeah.
A great name.
I'll just see if I have it here. I might even have it on my system. General.
Let's center straight and recycle.
That's your nightmare.
Girls run half tag and face.
Well, you mentioned substitute before. Substitute go 1.5.